Lanarkshire, 1971, the steel furnaces running day and night, and in the kitchen of every terraced house within 2 miles of Ravenscraig, the same smell. The same pot, the same meal that had been on that stove every Monday since before anyone living could remember. Number 12 on this list fed that entire community for 60 years, and has not appeared in a single Scottish kitchen since the last furnace went cold in 1992. Number 7 was so specific to the Dundee jute mills that the women who worked the looms ate it standing up in 12 minutes flat and called it dinner. And number 1, the Scottish working-class meal that sat on more tenement kitchen tables than any other from the Clyde to the Tay, is the one your generation ate without thinking. The generation after yours cannot name it. Is the one your generation ate without thinking. The generation after yours cannot name it. These are 15 Scottish working-class meals that have disappeared forever. And if your family came from those tenements and those mill towns and those mining rows, this one is for you. Number 15, Brose. Before porridge, before anything hot, Brose. Raw oatmeal, not cooked, not heated, poured into a bowl, covered with boiling water from the kettle. A pinch of salt, stirred once, and eaten immediately while the oats were still half raw. And the water had just softened the outer edges of the grain. 30 seconds from kettle to bowl, that was the point. In the crofting communities of Aberdeenshire and the fishing towns of the northeast coast in the 1950s, a man going out at 4 in the morning to the fields, or the boat had no time for a cooked breakfast. Brose was what he had in the dark before the day started. A pound of oatmeal in 1955 cost around 5p. A bowl of Brose cost a fraction of that. It was the cheapest start to a day that existed in Scotland, and it was also, in its raw state, extraordinarily sustaining. The uncooked oat releasing its energy slowly through the morning, in a way that porridge, for all its virtues, never quite matched. It vanished when the need for it vanished. When the 4 o'clock start became unnecessary. When the croft was sold and the boat was sold and the man went to work somewhere that had a canteen. But Brose was just the beginning of what Scottish working-class kitchens could do before dawn. The next one was made the night before and needed nothing in the morning at all. Number 14, Crowdie and Oatcakes. Crowdie, the fresh Scottish cheese made by warming soured milk until it separated. Draining the curds through muslin, pressing them lightly, seasoning with salt, is still made in Scotland. What has disappeared is its role as the daily working breakfast of the crofting and farming communities. Every household that kept a cow made Crowdie, not as a speciality, as a matter of course. The soured milk that accumulated through the week was turned into cheese that lasted the week. With oatcakes baked on the griddle, plain oatmeal, salt, a little dripping, water, eaten cold from the rack where they'd been stored since baking. That was breakfast in a Highland croft kitchen in 1952. Crowdie and Oatcakes, free food, made from what the cow provided and what the oat field provided. The cow went when the croft was absorbed into larger holdings. The griddle stopped when the range was replaced by an electric cooker. And Crowdie became a speciality product rather than something every household simply made. Number 13, Cock-a-Leekie, the proper pot version. Not the restaurant soup. Not the version served in a bowl at a hotel in Edinburgh with a garnish. The pot version, a boiling fowl, an old laying hen past her useful life. Placed in a pot with the full weight of leeks from the garden, barley, onion, a bay leaf, water to cover, simmered for 3 hours until the bird had given everything to the liquid. And the liquid had become something that no stock cube or restaurant kitchen has ever replicated. In the farming communities of Perthshire and Angus and Fife in the 1960s, Cock-a-Leekie was the Sunday pot. Not a bought chicken. A hen from the yard that had stopped laying. The transition from the yard to the pot was managed without sentiment because sentiment was something you couldn't afford. The transition from the yard to the pot was managed without sentiment because sentiment was something you couldn't afford. The boiling fowl is the irreplaceable ingredient. Modern poultry production does not produce older laying hens. And given her flavour to every year of that life, you cannot make the real thing. The restaurant version is chicken soup with leeks. The real Cock-a-Leekie is something else entirely, and it is gone. We are at number 13. The meals get more specifically industrial from here. Number 12. Steeltown Monday Broth, Lanarkshire. 60 years, every Monday, every kitchen within 2 miles of every steelworks in Lanarkshire, Motherwell, Wishaw, Coatbridge, Airdrie, the same pot. Sunday's bone, the leftover from whatever joint had been the Sunday dinner, went into the pot on Sunday evening. Water to cover, brought to a simmer, left overnight on the lowest heat. Monday morning the fat was skimmed, barley added, carrot, turnip, onion, leek, whatever was in the vegetable rack, seasoned with salt and white pepper. Left to cook all morning on the back ring while she did the washing, which was also Monday, which was why the pot had to be self-managing. By lunchtime, broth. Dense, dark, deeply savoury from the overnight bone, thick with barley and root vegetables, ladled into bowls with bread. The men who came home from the night shift ate it at noon. The children ate it when they came home from school. When Ravenscraig closed in 1992, the last integrated steelworks in Scotland, the Monday broth went with it. Not immediately. But the rhythm that had produced it, the Sunday joint, the Sunday bone, the Monday pot, the Monday washing, that rhythm belonged to a specific domestic economy that the steelworks had sustained. When the works closed, the economy changed, the rhythm changed, and the pot that had been on every Monday for 60 years stopped being on. Number 11. Powsowdie, sheep's head broth. The one that requires courage to describe. And the courage required tells you everything about the distance between 1955 and now. A sheep's head, split by the butcher, cleaned, into the pot with cold water, brought slowly to the boil, skimmed until the water ran clear. Then root vegetables, barley, onion, salt, white pepper, dried herbs, simmered for 4 hours. The meat stripped from the head, cheek, tongue, pieces from around the eye socket, returned to the broth, served in deep bowls with bread. Powsowdie appears in Scottish recipe books going back to the 18th century. Robert Burns references it. It was standard working-class food across the lowlands and the mining communities of Fife and Lanarkshire through to the 1960s. A sheep's head from the butcher in 1958 cost around 1 shilling. It produced enough broth and meat to feed 6 people for 2 meals, under a penny per head per meal. The butcher stopped stocking sheep's heads when supermarkets standardised the meat supply, and the specific anatomy of a sheep became commercially inconvenient. The knowledge of how to cook it, the skimming, the timing, the specific way the meat comes off a cooked sheep's cheek, that knowledge went with the generation that held it. Powsowdie is not in a single mainstream British cookbook. It exists only in Scottish food history records and in the memory of people who ate it before 1970. We haven't reached the top 10 yet, and the meals from here carry the most specific community identity of anything on this list. Number 10. Hairst Bree, harvest broth. Harvest time. The one occasion in the farming year when everyone ate well because the crop was in and the season had been good. And the communal labour of the harvest demanded a communal meal that matched the occasion. Hairst Bree, harvest broth, was made from the freshest possible vegetables, just lifted from the field or the kitchen garden. Combined with whatever meat was available, usually a piece of mutton or a rabbit caught in the field during the harvest itself. Everything at its seasonal peak. Nothing preserved, nothing stored. The vegetable that had been in the ground that morning in the pot by noon. In the farming communities of Aberdeenshire and the Mearns and the Lothians in the 1950s, Hairst Bree was the harvest dinner. Not a festive recipe, just a pot made from what the day had provided at the moment it was at its best. That specific relationship between the ground and the pot on the same day has effectively ended for everyone, except those who grow their own food. When the harvest became mechanised and the communal labour of it dispersed, the occasion that had given Hairst Bree its meaning disappeared. The broth became just a vegetable broth, and a vegetable broth has no occasion attached to it, and no occasion means no reason to make it specifically. Number 9. Dundee Millworkers' Piece, the standing dinner. 12 minutes. That was the dinner break in the Dundee Jute mills in the 1960s. 12 minutes from the loom, stopping to the loom, starting again. Not enough time to leave the building. Not enough time to sit down at a table. Enough time to eat what you had brought with you, standing at the frame. The piece, the packed meal that a Dundee jute mill worker brought in the 1960s was specific to the 12-minute constraint. It had to be eaten standing up, with one hand, in under 10 minutes, leaving 2 minutes to go to the toilet and wash your hands before the loom started again. Cold boiled potato, sliced, eaten from a piece of cloth. A wedge of hard cheese, sometimes a scone, not a sweet scone. A plain dropped scone baked on the griddle that morning, flat and dense and portable. Sometimes a slice of cold black pudding. From the Dundee specific recipe that used more oatmeal than the Lanarkshire version and therefore held its shape cold without crumbling. The jute industry collapsed through the 1970s as synthetic fibres replaced jute globally. The last Dundee jute mill closed in 1998. The specific food that the 12-minute break had produced, the standing meal engineered for a particular industrial constraint, disappeared with the constraint that had created it. Number 8. Hotch Potch. Not the same as Cock-a-Leekie, not the same as Scotch broth. Hotch Potch was the summer pot, the fresh vegetable broth of the Scottish kitchen, made specifically when the garden was at its most productive, and the ingredients were so fresh that long cooking would have been a crime. Neck of lamb, always neck, always on the bone, into a pot of cold water. Brought to the boil, skimmed, then the freshest possible vegetables added. Young peas still in their pods, lettuce from the garden, spring onions. Young carrots, the first turnips of the season, fresh cauliflower, simmered for an hour only, not the long simmer of the winter broths. Just enough to cook the lamb and let the vegetables give themselves to the liquid, while retaining some of their texture. The specific character of Hotch Potch was its freshness and its seasonality. The fact that you could only make it properly in the brief window, when peas were young enough and lettuce was garden fresh, and the first small turnips had just come in. Miss that window and you were making something else. It vanished when the garden went. When the tenement backyard that had grown the peas and the lettuce was built over or paved. When the connection between the kitchen and a growing plot within walking distance was severed for the urban working class. Without the garden-fresh ingredients in their specific seasonal window, Hotch Potch cannot be made. It requires a garden and a particular week of the year, and a willingness to make it only then and not at any other time. Number 7. Jute Mill Brose, Dundee specific. Different from number 15. Specific to Dundee, specific to the mill, and specific to the women. The jute mills of Dundee employed far more women than men. The industry was structured around female labour, which meant that the domestic food culture of Dundee was shaped by women who worked 12-hour shifts and had almost no time to cook. The brose they made for the mill was not the Croft brose of Aberdeenshire. It was enriched. Beef dripping, saved from whatever meat had been cooked at the weekend. Stirred into the raw oatmeal with the boiling water and a pinch of salt, making something denser and more calorie-rich than plain brose. Because the women who ate it were doing physical work in a hot environment for 12 hours, eaten standing at the mill gate before the shift started. 12 minutes. The same 12 minutes as the dinner break, only this time at 6 in the morning before the day began. Specific, engineered, practical. The exact nutritional response to the exact physical demand of a specific industry in a specific city, and gone completely when the industry was gone. Not because anyone forgot the recipe, but because the conditions that made the recipe necessary ceased to exist. Number 6. Stovies, the original version. Stovies still exist. You can still find stovies in Scotland today, which is why this entry requires a distinction. The stovies that exist today, potatoes, some form of fat, sometimes leftover meat, sometimes not, are a simplified version of what stovies were in the working-class kitchens of Glasgow and Edinburgh, and the mining towns of Fife and Lanarkshire from the late 19th century through to the 1970s. The original stovies were built on the dripping from the Sunday roast, the specific fat that came off a joint of beef or mutton, with all the flavour of the roasting built into it. That fat was the base of Monday's stovies. Potatoes sliced thin and cooked slowly in that specific fat with onion, the leftover shreds of Sunday's meat folded through at the end. Seasoned with salt and white pepper, the flavour of the original stovies was inseparable from the dripping that made them. Dripping made from the Sunday roast. When the Sunday joint became less common through the 1980s as eating habits changed, the dripping stopped accumulating in the tin by the range, and the stovies that followed were made with margarine or cooking oil, which produced something that looked the same and tasted entirely different. The name survived, the original thing did not. Number 5. Cullen Skink, home version. Cullen Skink is still on restaurant menus across Scotland. It is considered a classic Scottish soup, which is true, and the restaurant version has nothing to do with the version eaten in working-class homes. In the fishing communities of the Moray Firth in the 1950s and 60s, the home version used smoked haddock, anchor. Not the dyed yellow supermarket fillet, the proper pale golden undyed haddock that came from the smokehouse in Findon or Arbroath or Portsoy, still flexible from the smoke, with a flavour that supermarket haddock has never approached. Simmered in milk with potato and onion, anchor, the fish breaking into the liquid as it cooked, anchor. The milk absorbing the smoke until the whole pot tasted of the sea and the smokehouse simultaneously. The undyed haddock from a Scottish smokehouse is still available from specialist suppliers. It is expensive. It is a speciality product. In 1960, in Cullen or Buckie or Findochty, anchor. It was what you bought from the smokehouse at the end of the street for a few pence. Because the smokehouse was at the end of the street and the haddock was the local fish. The geography of the food supply was what made it the home version rather than the restaurant version. When that geography changed, when the local smokehouse was replaced by a distribution network, anchor, that could supply the same fish to restaurants across Scotland, the home version became the restaurant version, and the restaurant version costs £14. Number 4. Skirl in the pan, oatmeal with offal. Skirl in the pan, the sound it makes when the oatmeal hits the hot fat in the pan, that specific sizzle, that's skirl. Named for the sound of its own cooking. Offal, liver, kidney, whatever the butcher had cheaply diced small, fried in dripping in a heavy pan until almost cooked through. Then fine oatmeal scattered over everything and stirred through continuously as it cooked. The oatmeal toasting in the fat and the offal juices and swelling slightly and binding everything together into a dense, crumbly, deeply savoury mass. That was simultaneously grain and meat and neither. In the mining rows of Fife and the pit villages of Lanarkshire in the 1960s, skirl in the pan cost almost nothing. The oatmeal was always in the house. The offal was the cheapest thing at the butcher's counter. Together they made something that provided more energy per penny than almost anything else available. It vanished because the relationship with offal changed. Because the generation that grew up eating liver and kidney and heart was the last generation that accepted those ingredients without question. Their children tolerated it. Their grandchildren refused it. And when the cook stopped making things the family wouldn't eat, skirl in the pan stopped being made. The oatmeal is still in the house. The offal is still at the butcher. The knowledge of what to do with both of them together has gone. Number 3. Mealie Pudding, the homemade version. Not the white pudding of the supermarket pack, the homemade mealie pudding. Oatmeal, suet, onion, salt, pepper, mixed together and packed into a cleaned sheep's stomach or a length of ox runner and simmered in a pot of water for an hour, until the oatmeal had swelled and the sweet had melted through and the whole thing had become firm and dense and sliceable. Served hot, sliced thick, fried in dripping until the outside was crisp and the inside was still soft. Or served cold, sliced thin, eaten with soup as a side, or crumbled into a pot of broth at the end to thicken it. In the farming and crofting communities of the North East, Aberdeenshire, Moray, Caithness, Sutherland, mealie pudding was made at home. Whenever a sheep was slaughtered, using the stomach as the casing and the oatmeal that was always available as the filling. It was not a delicacy. It was a practical use of what was there. The homemade version requires the stomach or the ox runner from the butcher. These are not products that modern butchers routinely stock. When the butcher stopped having them, the home version became the bought version, and the bought version from the supermarket has the texture and flavour of something that has been processed and preserved and has lost the specific dense honesty of the thing made fresh at home. Number 2. Inky Pinky, leftover beef stew. The name first. Inky Pinky. Nobody is certain of the etymology. It appears in Scottish cookery references from the 19th century and means, essentially, a made-over stew of cold beef in an onion and vinegar sauce. The name is the most cheerful thing about a dish. that existed specifically to address the problem of leftover boiled or roasted beef that had gone cold and needed to become something worth eating again. Cold beef, sliced or broken into pieces, reheated in a sauce made from onion, softened in dripping, a spoonful of flour to thicken, beef stock, or the water the meat had boiled in, and a generous splash of malt vinegar. The vinegar. That was the specific character of Inky Pinky, the sharpness of the vinegar against the richness of the beef fat, cutting through the slightly tired quality that reheated cold beef always has, and making something that tasted deliberately assembled rather than accidentally recycled. In the tenement kitchens of Glasgow and Edinburgh in the 1960s, Inky Pinky was Tuesday's dinner made from Sunday's beef. Nothing wasted. The acid of the vinegar was also a mild preservative, relevant in kitchens without reliable refrigeration. It disappeared as the working-class Sunday joint became less central to the week's food. Without the cold beef from Sunday, there was nothing to make Inky Pinky from. The meal that existed only as a response to a specific earlier meal disappeared when the earlier meal stopped being made every week without fail. Number 1, Scots porridge, the overnight version. Not the porridge of today. Not the instant sachet, not the 5-minute pan. The overnight version, the only version, made in the only way that produces the specific thing that Scottish working-class families ate at breakfast every morning for generations, and that has now effectively ceased to exist in any domestic kitchen in Scotland. The night before, always the night before. Oatmeal, proper pinhead or steel cut, never rolled, stirred into cold salted water in the porridge pot and left to soak overnight. In the morning, the pot went on the heat and was stirred. Continuously, always continuously. You never stopped stirring. The wooden spurtle going round, and this is not decoration, this is technique. The continuous stirring prevents the starches from settling and clumping and produces a texture that cannot be achieved any other way. 20 minutes of stirring, at least 20 minutes. Some women said 30. The result was a porridge that was simultaneously completely smooth and slightly resistant under the spoon, the grain still present in the texture even though it had been cooking for hours between the soaking and the stirring. Dense without being heavy, savoury from the salt in the water, never sweet. Sugar was added at the table by the individual, and many never added it at all, eating their porridge with a little cold milk poured around the edge of the bowl, and nothing else. This was breakfast in every working-class Scottish household, from the Borders to the Northern Isles, from the Industrial Revolution through to roughly 1965, when instant oats and rolled oats and the pressure of the morning began to compress the 20-minute stir into a 2-minute pour, and the texture changed, and then the habit changed. And then the overnight soaking stopped, and then the spurtle went into the back of the drawer, and then eventually someone who didn't know what a spurtle was threw it out. The overnight Scots porridge is gone from domestic kitchens, not the idea of it. You can find the recipe in books, the practice. The daily practice of women who soaked the pot the night before as automatically as they banked the range, who stirred for 20 minutes every morning without thinking of it as an effort because it had never been anything other than what you did before the day started. That specific embodied knowledge, the feel of the spurtle in the hand, the sound of the porridge as it thickened, the exact moment when it was done, lives in fewer people every year. Your grandmother's hands knew it, and somewhere between her hands and the hands of the generation after yours, it stopped.